Years had passed since Tund first stood on that university stage, diploma in hand, ready to change the world. Now, as he prepared to address an international conference in Geneva, Switzerland, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The room was packed with delegates from around the globe, scientists, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and activists, all gathered to discuss solutions for global challenges like poverty, education, and sustainable development. And there, seated among them, was Emily, her familiar smile a source of quiet reassurance. When Tund stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. He paused for a moment, taking in the sea of faces before him. This was a long way from the dusty streets of Lagos where his story began. Yet, as he looked out at the crowd, he felt grounded by the memories of his struggles and triumphs, the sacrifices his family made, the kindness of strangers like Emily, and the countless lives he'd touched along the way. "Good morning," Tund began, his voice steady but warm. "My name is Tund Adeyemi, and I come from Nigeria, a country rich in culture, resilience, and potential. But it is also a country where millions still live without access to basic necessities like quality education or reliable electricity." He clicked a button, and a slideshow appeared behind him. Images of smiling children in classrooms, women sewing clothes under solar-powered lights, and men assembling solar panels filled the screen. Each photo told a story of hope and transformation. Tund went on to share how Brighter Futures Initiative had grown from a small dream into a movement impacting thousands of lives. He spoke about the solar energy projects bringing light to villages once shrouded in darkness, the vocational training programs empowering young people to build careers, and the scholarships enabling bright minds to pursue their dreams. His words were simple yet powerful, painting a vivid picture of what could be achieved when compassion met action. But Tund didn't just talk about successes, he also acknowledged failures. "Not every project worked perfectly," he admitted. "Some communities rejected our ideas because they didn't trust outsiders. Others struggled to adapt to new technologies. But we learned from those setbacks, listened more closely, and kept moving forward." As he neared the end of his speech, Tund paused and looked directly at Emily, who sat wiping away tears. "I wouldn't be standing here today if not for one act of kindness," he said softly. "A few years ago, I saved a woman's life on a bridge in Lagos. She later helped me reclaim my own dreams. That moment taught me something profound. No act of kindness is ever wasted. Even the smallest gesture can set off a chain reaction, creating ripples that touch lives far beyond what we imagine." The audience erupted into applause again, many rising to their feet. Tund bowed his head humbly, overwhelmed by the response. After the session ended, people lined up to speak with him, some wanting advice, others eager to collaborate, and a few simply thanking him for inspiring them. In the weeks that followed, Tund's story gained even wider recognition. News outlets featured him as a symbol of resilience and innovation, while organizations invited him to lead initiatives aimed at uplifting marginalized communities worldwide. Through it all, Tund remained grounded, always remembering the lessons of his past. Back home in Nigeria, he continued expanding his work, ensuring that his roots stayed firmly planted in the soil that shaped him. He visited his old neighborhood often, sharing meals with neighbors and mentoring young people who reminded him of his younger self. To them, he was proof that anything was possible if you dared to believe. One evening, as Tund sat outside his modest home watching the sunset, Emily joined him, holding 2 cups of tea. "You've done incredible things, Tund," she said, handing him a cup. "What's next for you?" Tund smiled thoughtfully, gazing at the horizon. "There's still so much to do," he replied. "Education, clean energy, healthcare. These are battles we must keep fighting. But most importantly, I want to remind people that kindness matters. It saved me once, and it can save others too." As the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Tund felt a deep sense of peace. His life had been transformed by a single decision: to reach out when someone needed help, And now, through his efforts, he hoped to inspire others to do the same. For Tund, success wasn't measured by awards or accolades, but by the lives he touched and the legacy of hope he left behind. And so, Tund's story became a beacon of inspiration, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and unwavering belief in the possibility of a brighter future. After years of relentless hard work and dedication, Tund finally graduated at the top of his class. The day of the ceremony was a blur of excitement and emotion. Dressed in a crisp black gown and cap, he walked across the stage to thunderous applause, clutching his diploma with trembling hands. His heart swelled as he scanned the audience and spotted his mother and siblings sitting proudly in the front row. Beside them sat Emily, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. For Tund, this moment wasn't just about personal achievement. It was a victory for everyone who had believed in him. But Tund didn't want to stop there. He knew that education was a gift, and like all gifts, it came with responsibility. Inspired by his own journey, he decided to dedicate his life to helping others rise above their circumstances. With Emily's continued support, he founded an organization called Brighter Futures Initiative, aimed at providing scholarships and vocational training to underprivileged youth in rural areas. The goal was simple yet powerful: to give children the tools they needed to break free from the cycle of poverty. The early days of building the initiative were challenging. Tund spent months traveling to remote villages, meeting families, and understanding their needs. Many parents were skeptical at first, unsure if sending their children to school would make a difference. How will learning math or science put food on our table? One father asked during a community meeting. Tund listened patiently before responding. Education won't fill your stomach today, he admitted, but it can change your family's future forever. To prove his point, Tund introduced practical programs alongside academics. Students learned skills like carpentry, sewing, and basic engineering, ensuring they could earn income while pursuing their studies. He also partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeships, giving graduates a clear path to employment. Slowly but surely, trust began to grow. Parents started enrolling their children, and soon classrooms that had once been empty were filled with eager learners. One of Tund's proudest achievements was the launch of a solar energy project. Drawing from his expertise in renewable energy, he designed affordable solar panels that could power homes and schools in off-grid communities. These panels not only provided light for studying, but also allowed families to charge phones, run small appliances, and even start micro-businesses. Villagers who had lived without electricity for generations now experienced its transformative power. And it was all thanks to Tund's vision. Word of Tund's work spread quickly, earning national attention. Journalists wrote stories about the young engineer-turned-philanthropist who was changing lives across Nigeria. Invitations poured in for interviews, conferences, and speaking engagements. At first, Tund felt out of place among politicians and industry leaders, but he soon realized that his story resonated deeply with people. Whether addressing a room of executives or chatting with villagers under a mango tree, Tund spoke from the heart, reminding everyone that kindness and determination could move mountains. Emily remained a steadfast ally throughout, using her connections to secure funding and resources for the initiative. Their friendship had grown stronger over the years, rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. Though some speculated about the nature of their relationship, both Tund and Emily laughed it off. "We're partners in making the world a better place," Emily would say with a wink. "That's all." As Tund looked back on how far he'd come, from saving Emily on the bridge to transforming entire communities, he marveled at the ripple effect of that single act of courage. What started as a moment of compassion had blossomed into something extraordinary. And yet, Tund knew this was only the beginning. There were still countless lives to touch, countless dreams to nurture. With every step forward, he carried the lessons of his past: resilience, gratitude, and the unshakable belief that no dream was too big if you dared to chase it. Little did Tund know, his efforts were about to reach an even wider audience, setting the stage for a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Tun's first day at the university was overwhelming, to say the least. The sprawling campus buzzed with energy, filled with students chatting animatedly, professors rushing between classes, and the faint hum of generators powering the buildings. For someone who had spent years navigating the chaotic streets of Lagos as a courier, this new world felt both exciting and intimidating. Tun clutched his bag tightly, feeling out of place in his simple clothes among students wearing polished shoes and neatly pressed uniforms. The challenges came quickly. His classes were demanding, packed with complex equations and technical jargon that often left him struggling to keep up. Many of his classmates had attended elite high schools or studied abroad, giving them an academic edge he didn't possess. Late nights became the norm as Tun pored over textbooks by candlelight, determined to bridge the gap. He skipped meals when money was tight and walked miles to save on transportation costs, all while maintaining his grades. But it wasn't just academics that tested him. It was also the emotional toll of being away from his family. Back home, his mother relied on him not just financially but emotionally. Hearing her voice crack during phone calls made guilt weigh heavily on his chest. "We're fine, my son," she would say, though he could hear the strain in her words. Still, Tun reminded himself why he was there, for them, for his dreams, and for the future they deserved. Amid the struggles, Emily remained a constant source of encouragement. She visited him whenever she could, bringing books, groceries, and even small gifts to brighten his days. More importantly, she listened. When Tun doubted himself, convinced he wasn't cut out for university life, Emily reminded him of his strength. "You've overcome so much already," she told him one evening over tea. "This is just another mountain. You'll climb it, step by step." As time went on, Tun began to find his footing. One course, in particular, sparked his passion: renewable energy engineering. Growing up in Nigeria, he had seen firsthand how communities suffered without reliable electricity. The idea of creating sustainable solutions to power homes and businesses ignited a fire within him. He threw himself into projects, designing prototypes for solar-powered devices and presenting them to his professors. To his surprise, his work earned praise, and soon he was invited to join research teams tackling real-world problems. Despite his growing confidence, Tun never forgot where he came from. On weekends, he volunteered at local schools, teaching children basic math and science. He shared his story with them, hoping to inspire even one child to dream bigger. "If I can do it," he would say, "so can you." By the end of his second year, Tun had transformed. Gone was the shy, uncertain young man who had stepped onto campus doubting his abilities. In his place stood a confident, driven individual with a clear purpose. Yet through it all, he remained humble, always attributing his success to the people who had supported him: his family, his professors, and especially Emily. One afternoon, as Tun sat under a tree reviewing notes, Emily joined him, carrying 2 cups of chai. "How are you holding up?" she asked, handing him a cup. He smiled, taking a sip before answering. "I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I think I found what I'm meant to do, helping communities through engineering. It feels right." Emily beamed, pride shining in her eyes. "I always knew you'd shine, Tun. You just needed the chance to prove it, to yourself as much as to anyone else." In that moment, Tun realized how far he'd come. From the dusty roads of Lagos to the halls of a prestigious university, every obstacle had shaped him into the person he was becoming. And though the journey was far from over, he knew one thing for certain: he was no longer running from hardship. He was using it to build something meaningful. Emily's mind raced with possibilities after her conversation with Tun. She couldn't shake the thought of how much potential he had, hidden beneath the weight of his responsibilities. Here was a young man who dreamed of becoming an engineer, a dream that had been snatched away by circumstances beyond his control. Yet despite everything, Tun remained kind, hardworking, and hopeful. Emily knew she had to do something to help him reclaim his future. A few days later, when Tund arrived at her office for another delivery, Emily greeted him with an unusual request. "Tund," she began, her tone serious yet warm, "I've been thinking about what you told me, that you wanted to study engineering but had to stop because of your family. What if I told you there might be a way for you to go back to school?" Tund frowned, confused. "What do you mean, ma'am?" he asked cautiously. He wasn't sure where this was going, but his instincts told him to tread carefully. Emily smiled reassuringly. "I have connections in the education sector here in Nigeria and abroad. I believe I can help you secure a scholarship to study engineering. It wouldn't cost you anything. It's fully funded." Tund's eyes widened in disbelief. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. The idea seemed too good to be true. "But why would you do that for me?" he stammered finally, his voice tinged with both gratitude and hesitation. "You barely know me." Emily leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Because you saved my life, Tund. You showed me kindness when I needed it most, without expecting anything in return. This is my way of saying thank you, and of helping someone who truly deserves it." Tund felt a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to believe her, to accept the opportunity she was offering, but doubt lingered in his mind. Could he really leave his family behind to pursue his dreams? Would they understand? And what if he failed? These questions swirled in his head as he sat silently, grappling with the enormity of the decision before him. Sensing his hesitation, Emily placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Take your time to think about it," she said gently. "Talk to your family. But remember this. Sometimes taking a chance is the only way to create a better future, for yourself and for those you love." That evening, Tund returned home with a heavy heart and a racing mind. He shared Emily's offer with his mother and siblings, explaining how it could change not just his life but theirs as well. At first, his mother was reluctant, worried about losing the stability Tund provided. But after hours of discussion, she saw the determination in her son's eyes and gave her blessing. With his family's support, Tund accepted Emily's offer. Over the next few weeks, she worked tirelessly behind the scenes, using her network to secure a full scholarship for him at a prestigious university. When the acceptance letter finally arrived, Tund held it in trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to dream again. Before leaving for school, Tund visited Emily one last time to express his gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given me a second chance at life." Emily shook her head, smiling warmly. "You already repaid me the day you pulled me back from the edge of that bridge," she replied. "Now go out there and make the most of this opportunity. Show the world what you're capable of." As Tund prepared to embark on this new chapter of his life, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he wasn't alone. With Emily's belief in him and his family's unwavering support, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would transform not just his life, but the lives of countless others. The next day, as Tund went about his usual routine of delivering packages, he couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He replayed their encounter on the bridge over and over in his mind. The fear, the relief, the quiet moments afterward when she had opened up just a little. He wondered if she was truly okay now, or if her pain still lingered beneath the surface. Though he tried to focus on his work, his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone in her hotel room, staring out the window at the bustling streets below. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The despair that had driven her to the edge of the bridge still lingered, but it was tempered by something new: gratitude. She couldn't forget the young man who had saved her life, a stranger who had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than she'd experienced in months. His humility and selflessness stood out sharply against the backdrop of her lonely existence in Lagos. Determined to thank him properly, Emily decided to track him down. She remembered the name of the courier company printed on Tun's uniform and called them later that morning. "I need someone to deliver a package to my office," she told the dispatcher, casually mentioning Tun's name. "If possible, I'd like the same rider who helped me yesterday." When Tund received the delivery request, he was surprised to see Emily's address pop up again. Part of him felt uneasy. Was this coincidence, or did she want something from him? But curiosity got the better of him, and he set off on his motorcycle, the small package tucked securely under his arm. When he arrived at her office building, Emily greeted him warmly, her face lighting up with recognition. "Tund," she exclaimed, stepping forward to meet him. "Thank you for coming." Tund shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to say. "It's my job, Mom," he replied politely. "Just doing my duty." Emily shook her head, smiling softly. "No, it's more than that. You've done so much for me already. Please, let me thank you properly." Before Tund could protest, she handed him an envelope. Confused, he opened it and found several crisp banknotes inside. Far more money than he earned in weeks. "I can't accept this," Tund said immediately, pushing the envelope back toward her. "Helping you wasn't about getting paid. It was the right thing to do." Emily sighed, touched by his refusal, but not entirely surprised. "I understand," she said gently. "But please, let me help you in some way. You deserve it." Their conversation continued, shifting from polite exchanges to deeper topics. Emily learned about Tund's struggles, how he worked tirelessly to support his family, how he'd given up his dream of becoming an engineer after his father's death. In turn, Tund listened as Emily shared fragments of her own story, the pressure of living up to expectations, the isolation she felt being so far from home, and the overwhelming sense of failure that had led her to the bridge. As they talked, a bond began to form between them. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they discovered common ground in their shared humanity, their hopes, fears, and desires for a better future. Emily admired Tund's resilience and optimism, qualities she realized she desperately needed in her own life. For Tund, Emily's openness and empathy reminded him that even those who seemed to have everything could carry invisible burdens. Over the following weeks, Emily made it a point to stay in touch with Tund. She requested deliveries to her office regularly, using these visits as excuses to chat with him. Their conversations grew longer and more meaningful, ranging from discussions about Nigerian culture to reflections on life's challenges. Each interaction left Tund feeling inspired and Emily feeling grounded. One day, as they sat together during one of these impromptu meetings, Emily asked, "Do you ever think about going back to school, finishing what you started?" Tund hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it's complicated. My family depends on me, and I don't have the means to pursue education anymore." Emily nodded thoughtfully, her mind already working on an idea. What if she could help him reclaim his dreams? After all, Tund had given her a second chance at life. Maybe it was time for her to return the favor. After the harrowing events on the bridge, Emily's tears began to subside, but Tund could still see the weight of her pain in her eyes. She sat slumped on the ground, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Tund stayed by her side, unsure of what else to do. He didn't know much about comforting people. His own life had taught him more about enduring hardship than offering solace. But he knew one thing: leaving her alone wasn't an option. "Do you want to talk about it?" Tund asked gently, his voice soft and steady. He didn't push, giving her space to decide whether she wanted to open up or not. Emily hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. "Not now," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of traffic. "But thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Tund nodded, understanding that some wounds couldn't be healed with words, at least not right away. Instead, he focused on practical things. "Do you live nearby? Can I take you home?" he offered. Emily looked at him, surprised by his kindness. Most people might have walked away after saving her, considering their job done. But Tun seemed genuinely concerned, his brown eyes filled with warmth and sincerity. Emily hesitated again, then nodded weakly. "Yes, please," she said. "I'm staying in a hotel close to here." With that, Tun helped her to her feet. She wobbled slightly, still shaken from the ordeal, and instinctively leaned on him for support. Tun steadied her without hesitation, guiding her carefully off the bridge and toward his motorcycle parked nearby. As they walked, Emily glanced at him curiously. "You're just a courier, right?" she asked, her tone carrying no judgment, only curiosity. Tun chuckled softly, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, that's me," he replied with a modest smile. "Just doing my job, delivering packages. Today, I guess I delivered something else too." Emily managed a faint smile, the first real sign of calm since Tund had found her on the bridge. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "That's more than just something else." Tund shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone should have done," he insisted. "No big deal." They reached his motorcycle, and Tund handed her his spare helmet. "Here, put this on," he said, motioning for her to wear it. Emily complied, though she couldn't help but notice how worn and scratched the helmet was. It matched the rest of his gear, simple, functional, and far from luxurious. Yet there was something deeply admirable about Tund's humility and selflessness. Here was a man who had so little yet gave so much. The ride to Emily's hotel was quiet but peaceful. The cool evening breeze brushed against their faces as they navigated the streets of Victoria Island. For the first time in days, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. There was something reassuring about Tund's presence, his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, and the way he carried himself with dignity despite his circumstances. When they arrived at the hotel, Emily turned to Tund before getting off the bike. "I owe you more than I can say," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "If there's anything I can do to repay you." She trailed off, unsure how to express the depth of her gratitude. Tund simply smiled and shook his head. "You don't owe me anything," he said firmly. "Just promise me you'll be okay." Emily nodded, tears welling up in her eyes once more. "I'll try," she whispered. "And thank you. Really, thank you." Tund gave her a small wave as she stepped into the hotel lobby, watching until she disappeared inside. As he rode away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. Something about Emily, and the connection they shared in those brief moments, felt significant, like the universe had brought them together for a reason. Little did Tund know, this act of courage and compassion would ripple through both their lives in ways neither of them could have anticipated. For now, though, he returned to his deliveries, his mind replaying the events of the day. Saving Emily had reminded him of something important. Even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness could light the way forward, for others, and perhaps for himself too. Tund's heart raced as he approached the woman on the bridge. He didn't know what to expect, but something deep inside told him he couldn't just walk away. The woman stood motionless, her hands gripping the railing tightly, her gaze fixed on the water below. Her white dress fluttered in the breeze, and her pale face was streaked with tears. Tund felt a lump form in his throat. She looked so fragile, like a single gust of wind could sweep her off her feet. "Are you okay, Mom?" Tund called out softly, careful not to startle her. His voice carried over the gentle hum of the city in the distance. The woman flinched at the sound, turning her head slightly to look at him. Her blue eyes, filled with pain and despair, met his for a brief moment before she turned back toward the lagoon. Tund took another step closer, his pulse quickening. "Please, let me help you," he said, his tone pleading yet gentle. But the woman didn't respond. Instead, she shifted her weight forward, leaning dangerously over the edge of the railing. Tund's stomach dropped. Without thinking twice, he rushed toward her, his legs moving faster than they ever had before. He reached out just in time, grabbing her arm firmly as she began to tilt forward. The woman gasped, startled by his sudden presence, but Tund held on tightly, refusing to let go. For a few terrifying seconds, they both teetered precariously near the edge. Tund's muscles burned as he pulled her back with all his strength, his feet slipping slightly on the smooth surface of the bridge. Finally, with one last effort, he managed to yank her safely onto solid ground. They collapsed together, breathing heavily, their hearts pounding in unison. The woman sobbed uncontrollably, her body trembling as she clung to Tund's shirt. He didn't say anything at first, letting her cry it out while he kept a protective hand on her shoulder. Slowly, the tension in her body eased, and her sobs turned into quieter sniffles. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky and barely above a whisper. Why did you save me?" she asked, her accent unfamiliar to Tund's ears. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Tund replied simply, his own voice thick with emotion. He didn't know much about this woman or why she had been standing on the edge of that bridge, but he knew one thing for certain: life was precious, and no one should have to face their darkest moments alone. The woman introduced herself between tears. Her name was Emily, and she was from Britain. She had come to Nigeria for work, but found herself overwhelmed by loneliness and personal struggles. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that she felt trapped in a foreign land, disconnected from everything familiar. Tund listened intently, nodding occasionally to show he understood. Though their lives were worlds apart, he felt a strange connection to her, a shared sense of carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon in shades of orange and pink, Emily's breathing steadied. She wiped her tears with the sleeve of her dress and looked at Tund with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved my life." Tund shook his head modestly. "I only did what anyone else would have done," he said, though deep down, he wasn't sure that was true. Not everyone would have stopped. Not everyone would have cared enough to intervene. But Tund wasn't like everyone else. Even in his own struggles, he had room in his heart for others. For a while, they sat there in silence, watching the city lights flicker to life across the water. The world seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath after the chaos of the past few minutes. Tund didn't know it yet, but this encounter was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. In the heart of Lagos, Nigeria, where the streets buzzed with activity and life, moved at a relentless pace, there lived a young man named Tund. At just 22 years old, Tund carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Life hadn't been kind to him, but he faced it all with quiet determination. Every morning, as the sun rose over the city, Tund would hop onto his battered motorcycle, its engine sputtering to life after a few kicks. He worked as a courier, weaving through chaotic traffic and narrow alleys to deliver packages for people who barely noticed him. To them, he was just another face in the crowd, a poor young man trying to make ends meet. Tund's days were long and exhausting. The scorching heat of the afternoon sun beat down on him mercilessly as he navigated the busy roads of Victoria Island, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Lagos. The contrast between his life and the lives of those around him was stark. While towering glass buildings housed offices filled with air-conditioned comfort, Tund sweated under the open sky, clutching parcels wrapped in brown paper. His uniform, a faded blue shirt and trousers, was often stained with dirt and oil from his bike, but he wore it with pride because it represented his hard work. Life hadn't always been this difficult for Tund. Once upon a time, he dreamed of becoming an engineer. He loved tinkering with gadgets and solving problems, imagining himself building bridges or designing machines that could change the world. But fate had other plans. When Tund was only 16, his father passed away suddenly, leaving behind a grieving family and mounting debts. As the eldest child, Tund dropped out of school to take care of his mother and two younger siblings. Dreams of engineering school faded into the background as reality demanded sacrifices. Despite everything, Tund refused to let bitterness consume him. He believed that kindness was a gift anyone could give, no matter how little they had. Whether it was helping an elderly woman cross the street or sharing his lunch with a hungry child, Tund found joy in small acts of compassion. His optimism was infectious, and even though his customers rarely acknowledged his presence beyond handing over packages, Tund greeted everyone with a warm smile and a cheerful good morning. One fateful afternoon, as Tund sped through Victoria Island, something unusual caught his eye. On a bridge overlooking the shimmering waters of the lagoon, he spotted a woman standing dangerously close to the edge. Her figure stood out against the backdrop of the setting sun, her white dress billowing gently in the breeze. There was something unsettling about the way she leaned forward, staring blankly at the water below. Tund slowed down his bike and pulled over, his heart pounding. Something inside him told him this wasn't right. For a moment, he hesitated. What could he possibly do? He was just a poor courier, not a hero. But then he thought about his father's words. Kindness costs nothing but can change everything. Taking a deep breath, Tund decided to trust his instincts. Little did he know that this decision would alter the course of his life forever.